I think it's a great time to be in sales. I was just having this conversation with one of my managers recently. I think the only thing that's different about being in sales right now than even a couple years ago is that you really can tell the people that like the top 10%. I can tell the people that have been like skating by and now you're like asking them to do a little bit more and they're not raising to the occasion that you could do that in COVID when like things were just flying off the shelf and you didn't have to build a business case and you could get it signed from the SDR manager
In a
like
pulse and a heartbeat.
exactly and like anyone could close. I think we're in this era that one, you can use AI, you can lean into it, and you can figure out ways to be creative and successful because we're also going back in time in some ways when it comes to outbounding and prospecting. We're having to figure out like what does actually good outbound look like when we used to just drop people into a sequence and let it rip and get a certain number of people replying. And so I think it's exciting. I think you got to own your craft and be confident that like you want to be a seller and if you do that and get the coaching, you invest in yourself, listening to your calls, doing all of that, like the future is you're going to be successful and you're going to have a bright future in sales.
This is Conversations with Women in Sales, an award-winning podcast launched by Barbara Giamanco and now hosted by Lori Richardson. Listen to interviews with amazing women about their journeys in their sales careers, often discussing sales leadership tips, ideas, and strategies. We aim to inspire women to consider or continue a sales career, and for some women to grow into sales leadership. Men, we need your support and appreciate your allyship. Now here's our host, Lori Richardson.
I'm here today with Shay Keeler, and Shay is VP Growth at Common Room. So welcome, Shay. It's so great to see you again.
Thanks, Lori. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we have spoken previously when you were in your outreach days, and you have a really interesting, your career path has been interesting because I know prior to outreach, you were at other places. One of them was Yelp, where you were senior sales manager. And then when you went to outreach, though, you took a step back, didn't you? You worked your way back up. Can you tell us a little bit about that and then how that kind of leads into what you're doing today?
Yeah, I was really lucky. I had 7 great years at Yelp where I started my career in sales and doing that. And I was living in Washington D.C. and I'd opened our office there. And I had remember learning about a company called Outreach, and it was exactly what would solve a lot of the problems that I was trying to teach my team. And I would sit in pipeline interviews week over week and be like, okay, we do the same activity. Like, here's what we got to do. And when I learned about outreach, I was like, I need to work there. And anyway, serendipitously, I ended up relocating to Seattle. I grew up in Portland, and so I wanted to be in a little bit bigger city. And then my mission was, how do I get in at outreach? And I interviewed for a mid-market sales manager role there that Mark Costolo was hiring for. And
Shout out to Mark.
yeah, yeah, gotta love Mark, and, he said, like, "Shay, I really like you, but I can't put you in this role, you don't have any software experience, like, would you be interested in being an AE? And then, like, we could see if this works." So, I had to think about it. It was, like, kind of also, like, a shot to the ego after,
Yeah.
working your way up and getting that and then I came back to him, I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And so we both took a bet. He took a bet on me, I took a bet on him, and that he would actually be, hold up to his word,
Mhm.
there, and it was the best thing I've ever done in my career to date.
Oh, yeah, because that doesn't always happen. People will be like, well, we planned to do it, but then this happened and that happened. But he was good on his word, and you showed him that you could adapt to software.
Yeah, I think, I quickly came in and I performed very fast and was doing a lot of the things that, you look for a future leader, and so I tried to make it the no-brainer promotion.
You had a pattern like that because you did the same thing at Yelp, right? You started as a rep and you worked your way
Yeah.
up. So that seems to be a way to, a path to success for some people. And if you're not too full of pride, that, well, I have to have this specific title. It doesn't always work that way, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I'd actually say, like, I from throughout my whole career, I have done a job that I don't have the title for, and it was up until my current role where I finally got the VP title, even though I've had multiple roles where I was doing a VP job, that that I finally got it. But I've learned like that you have to bet on the experience and you have to take the experience over the title, because every time someone talks to me for advice or a role, they always talk about the companies I've been at, not like the title that I had while I was there,
Right.
or the experience that I had while I was there. And so that's been my biggest advice to people is like, don't bet on the title that you're going to get. A lot of times, even the money, I've made less money at different orgs than I could have, but I got the best experience and I like doing what I was doing.
Interesting, interesting. And you were at Outreach when it's crazy growth too. Like
Yeah,
it's
I was
like
there for 4.5 years, and I started as an account executive, and I left leading a 70-person org running, commercial new logo sales, opened APAC. I ran EMEA, so it was quite the experience.
oh, wow, that's amazing. Where do you get the confidence from when there's an opportunity ahead of you? Like they say, "Oh, we're gonna open a Mia. Do you want to help
Yeah.
do that?"
So I have said no to like like been offered a role in like within a company and said no one time, and it was Mark offered me the SMB business when I went to Outreach, and I knew I wouldn't get where I wanted to go because he had told me previously, Shay, you only have like SMB, you need consultative, not just transactional. So I said no when he offered me that manager role because I knew in my gut this wouldn't set me up. Every other time I just say yes because I think the confidence comes from I know I can fix problems. I have a process that I know I can quickly adapt and implement and then make changes as I need. And you learn so much from saying yes to these opportunities, even though they're scary. A lot of times, I have a counterpart or I'm going up against a man that sometimes my confidence isn't as, I don't come across as confident as them, if you will. But every opportunity you learn so much and you gotta like figure out, what's it like to sell an APAC and how do their buying cycles look different? What's it like to run a team in EMEA? So many of those opportunities have taught me what I know now.
Yeah, and I would imagine you have good mentors and champions in all the different places you are. Would that be true?
Yes, I have been very fortunate to have a lot of people that support me throughout my career and have been in my corner.
That's great. So when you have the opportunity to move to another role,
Yeah.
do you think that I'm just trying to think of whether that comes in turn. Were you raised to just go, were you an athlete?
I was a dancer growing up, and so I think what I would apply some of that to sales because as a dancer, you're like an individual, but you're also on a team sport. So you're getting a lot of feedback like, Shay, do this better, Shay, do this. But then
Uh,
you're also trying to compete and work as like a group. So
yeah.
I think there's that aspect. I think I've also had at Yelp, I had a lot of, I really appreciate how they built things because it was always, if you want to get this promotion, here's what you have to do. You have to turn a rep around, you have to be consistent. And they made it really clear. And I'm taking that into software as I don't think as many software orgs have crystal clear, like, get really good at coaching. And so you turn this rep around, but I've taken my experience to say yes and just do it. I also don't think that the worst thing that happens is like you do it and it doesn't work out. Like then they can just go, the business can figure out the options there. But most of the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah, like the worst thing that can happen is maybe it doesn't work out.
exactly. Like in that you would have never known unless you tried it.
Yeah, because one other thing I've noticed in talking with women who are in leadership positions is that sometimes a woman in the audience, when we've done a live event, will say, "Where did you get your confidence from?" And every one of the women on the panel were kind of like, "What do you mean?" Like, it's not, that was not an issue for all women. It's not a universal thing that there's a confidence issue. Would you agree with that? Because you seem to be not one that's gonna worry. You're gonna take a chance, you're gonna take a risk and do your best.
Yeah, I would say I do think confidence is always in the back of my mind from like imposter syndrome, how I communicate. Am I delivering it in the same way as like my male counterpart would? But I think what I've been fortunate enough, especially during my time at Outreach, was I learned really quickly if I'm who I am and I'm like authentically Shay and I communicate. Like I think one of the things that has led to a lot of my success is I'm really honest and vulnerable about what's working and what's not working in my business. No one's ever going to be caught by surprise if I'm not going to hit my forecast. Or if something I'm seeing like trends, I know how to communicate up in a really effective way. And I think that's what I've learned is that a lot of men are not as confident in that. They'll tell you everything's going right. They'll paint you this beautiful story that there is not a single issue in their business and like everything. And so I've learned that, yes, I have imposter syndrome at times. Yes, I'm not always confident in these roles that I take and like, am I the right person to be doing it? But if I believe in myself, and sometimes I call the right people for pep talks that I need, but if you lead by authentically who you are and lean into what has made you successful, no one knows what they're doing in the role they're in most of the time. Like everyone's kind of winging it to some degree in some way.
Yeah.
So
That's so interesting. Did you ever think you needed to be more technical? Because I know for me, I've always been in tech, but I've never been that technical person. I've always been able to pull in an engineer or something.
yeah, I'm not a super technical person either. So I would say I've always been able to lean on my resources that have
Yeah.
been really good at that. Something I try to always do is I'm not great at everything. I try to lean on the people that are excel in things that are my weaknesses, whether that's like who I hire in my org or who supports me on calls. I always try to bring in the people that, can shine where my weaknesses are.
Yeah. And now you're with an organization, Common Room, and you guys have go-to-market AI, and you have a customer intelligence platform. How does AI change things in terms of what a rep needs to know or do or be like?
Yeah, I think that AI is making reps jobs easier because you can get information faster, you can prep for calls quicker, you can have like everything served up to you, but it's shining a light on those that are not leaning in or doing what they need to do to be successful. I say all the time, like it's harder than ever to be an account executive, but it's also easier because there's all these things that you can use to make you better at your job, but it just looks a little bit different. And so I believe that the reps that are not leaning into AI or figuring out ways to be successful with it are the ones that are not going to be as successful in the future.
Yeah, I like the idea that AI is your assistant. It's not your
Yeah,
replacement.
completely.
It's not gonna be your replacement unless you don't figure out what all's going on with AI and what all you need to know so that you're not caught by surprise.
100. Yeah. I mean, no one's going to want to work like $1 million deal with an AI agent. I mean, like maybe, but like hopefully not during my lifetime. So like you've got to figure out how to use it to make you better and it can make you so much more efficient.
Yeah, and you need to find companies and leadership that will support that, so you're not
Completely.
doing bad AI stuff
Yeah, 100%.
and blowing your market opportunity because you don't have good leadership that knows how to do that, so
Yeah.
that's important. So women are still underrepresented, particularly in leadership in
Yeah.
tech. Any suggestions? Wait, I don't know. I'm kind of throwing my hands up at times.
Yeah.
I'm very optimistic and future forward but I do wonder sometimes because we don't seem to there's some really great companies that are doing really great things. I think Outreach in its heyday was a great example of that, where they really did a lot of things focused on getting people in roles that maybe weren't there previously. And so, but there's also a long way to go still.
Yeah.
Any advice for women who are getting into maybe a tech sales role?
I think my biggest advice is don't compare yourself to other people and figure out what makes you great and embrace that. I think that was what I've been told I'm too bossy, I'm too direct,
You're too
this
much.
and yeah, I'm too much. Like I've been told everything and figure out the people and the organizations and the leadership that will support that. At Outreach, I am a very direct person that was embraced. Like I got promotions and I got different opportunities because I was direct and I knew how to own my business. Same at Common Room, like I'm in these roles and I, keep getting opportunities because of those. So like embrace that. I think from organizational standpoints, like you have to put effort and you have to put time into it and you have to want to drive change in your leadership team, or you're constantly just going to keep seeing the same faces show up over and over and over again. And then I always also, like, if you get the advice that you're too bossy or you're too direct, like, figure out, like, is it really a you thing, or is it the organization that you're at? I've been at orgs that, like, who I was not the right fit for that org, and that's okay. And that doesn't make me a bad leader. That doesn't make how I'm leading the wrong way. But figure out where you can really be authentically yourself and, like, feel confident, because that's when you're going to do your best work and you're going to perform at your highest level.
Do you think that's easier now that you've been to a number of other organizations? You kind of know what to look for and what to ask for. I mean, people that are newer in their roles, they don't
Yeah.
really know. They find out afterwards that, hey, this isn't really what I bargained for?
I think transparently, I think it's hard to see it before you get into a company. I think you can ask every single question that you should ever ask. You can talk to every single person that you can talk to within that org. But what you get told in the interview process versus the reality is, unfortunately, oftentimes really different. And I've experienced that a couple different times in my career.
Sure.
Something that has helped me, though, is like back channeling and going to different people and really trying to get the real of what's going on in the state of the business versus what they're painting you to sell you on coming there. One of the things that made me pick Common Room was we have a female CEO. Her name is Linda. She's very direct. I really resonated with that. And so I knew that I could be authentically myself if that's who our leader was and that's who the CEO was it made it really easy. So I think understanding that is also important in what that looks like. And if they have diversity on their executive team, then oftentimes they'll lean into it as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so, what do you say to male or female
Yeah.
rep? Maybe they're in an SDR role and they've heard, AI is going to take all that over, and AI is going to be harder to be an AI. What advice do you have for people that are really learning? Like, do I really want to be in sales? Is this a good time to be in sales? I think it's a great time to be in sales because
I
it's
do too.
exciting, right?
Yeah, I think it's a great time to be in sales. I think I was just having this conversation with one of my managers recently. I think the only thing that's different about being in sales right now than even a couple years ago is that you really can tell the people that, like, the top 10%. I can tell the people that have been, like, skating by and now you're, like, asking them to do a little bit more and they're not raising to the occasion that you could do that in COVID when, like, things were just flying off the shelf and you didn't have to build a business case and, you could get it signed from the SDR manager, like,
It's in a
like,
pulse and a heartbeat, right?
exactly, and, like, anyone could close. I think we're in this era that, one, you can use AI, you can lean into it, and you can figure out ways to be creative and successful, because we're also kinda going back in time in some ways when it comes to, like, outbounding and prospecting. We're having to figure out, like, what does actually good outbound look like, when we used to just drop people into a sequence and let it rip and, like, get a certain number of people replying. And so I think it's exciting. I think you gotta own your craft and be confident that, like, you wanna be a seller. And if you do that and you get the coaching, you invest in yourself, listening to your calls, doing all of that, like, the future is you're gonna be successful and you're gonna have a bright future in sales.
That's so funny. I was just talking to Beck Holland, and she almost exactly said, you got to own your craft. It's like, this is a time where it shows, right? It shows up
Yes.
and you can't fake it. And I think that's good. That's a good thing.
Well, it's funny because there's more ways that you can fake it with, like, how quickly you can prep and you can do these different things using AI. But then if it's showing so much more when you actually don't, like, read the document or come with a point of view or in that regards.
Yeah. Or you don't really know what kind of business your buyer is in, even though you try.
You're just really trying to wing it.
Yeah, there's some really, really bad things that can happen for sure.
So true.
That's great. How do you stay on top of things? Like, what do you do to learn and grow?
I try to continue to be, like, a student of my own craft. So whether that's, I think being a leader is a lot like being, like, a professional athlete coach. So I personally like listen to a ton of podcasts and read a ton of books about like just coaching methodologies and styles. Outside of sales, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I take different courses to stay on top of it. My best advice is to anyone that's still on sales calls is listen to a ton of calls. I listen to a ton of my sales reps calls to understand what are we hearing, what are people saying, how are we replying to that, how should we be replying to that, all kinds of things.
That's great. Any podcast, like a leadership podcast you might recommend or
I try to go outside of just sales for leadership
Yeah.
podcasts, so I listen to a wide variety of them, like the Diary of the CEO, like different ones to just like hear from successful, business people in their craft to learn from that as well.
Yeah, that's great. Well, gee, I'm so happy that you're in a great growth spot and your trajectory is going, it keeps climbing, which is great. Is Common Room hiring at all or I don't
Yeah, we are. I'm actually hiring for commercial and growth account executives, so please reach out if you're interested.
big plug there. That's great.
Yes.
That's great. Just can they reach out to you through LinkedIn or
Yeah, please.
Google?
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds great. Well, Shay Keeler, VP Growth at Common Room, thank you so much for being here and wish you a great end of the year. We're heading into the last part of the year here. And may all good things happen. And we will keep our eye on you and keep watching as things go for you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Lori.
Thanks, Shay.
I'm your announcer, Larry Long Jr., and we sincerely thank you for listening to this episode of Conversations with Women in Sales, encouraging you to share an episode with all of your friends and your favorite male allies. Let's work together to change the face of sales. Until next time, you can find all of our episodes at womensalespros.com/podcast.